One step above God. That's what the macaw whalers of the Pacific Northwest said about the orca. The Haida Indians of the Queen Charlotte Islands believes that the killer whale is the most powerful being in the world. An Indian in Namu, British Columbia, felt likewise when he said that the orcas are like gods. An Eskimo said that within the orca is the soul of man. The Innu of Japan believed that the killer whale was the ruler of the deep sea. As Gary Snyder said, every culture that knows the orca feels the same about it.
The belief is when we die, our spirit will be born of a baby killer whale. We will live the life of that killer whale, and when the killer whale dies, our spirit will be released to the everlasting potlatch, or our heaven. The Maganuk, you'll always see usually a human face incorporated into the design or the carving. And that's symbolizing the afterlife of the hunters, the sea hunters in old, or in my belief, the hunters of nowadays. When we die, our spirits will be released and we will go into the domain or the life of the Maganuk for a short period. I'll go out in the fog and I'll interact with the whales. I'll get close with the boat and I'll sit there and I'll just talk to the whales as they pass. Kela kasla Maganuk. Welcome home, killer whales. Welcome back to our home. When I go out there and see them and watch them swim under the boat, and every now and then maybe stick my hand out if they're close enough and touch them, it's just my way of interacting with some of the people in my family who have passed on in the last few years. Some legends tell that families, their first people, their origin crests are the Maganuk, killer whale. And those people, they came about being on Earth because the Creator put animals, mountains, and trees on this great Earth. And then later on, the brother of his, the Transformer, came across the great land, and when he swept across the world, he transformed mountains, trees, supernatural, spiritual animals, as well as natural animals into the first humans. And some of our families, they originated from the transformation from Maganuk into human. Even the scientists nowadays can't figure out where does the Maganuk go during the winter time. They come here into the Johnson Straits and feed in salmon, ones they call the transients, harvest seals. But in the wintertime they disappear. They leave our shores and head west out into the great ocean, and are not seen again until the following year. While our legends tell that the Maganuk go to a big house out in the ocean. That's where they live, like our people lived in big houses at one time. I even heard one story about how the Maganuk, when they get to an island where their big house is, they transform into half human, half killer whale. They walk from the water and they occupy their winter home. And they live there and they dance as our people used to, reminisce about their great hunting exploits they had in Johnson Straits and the salmon and herring. And then in spring, when the salmons return, so do the Maganuk. They go back, walk down their beach, transform into the Maganuk of the water, and they swim back to our shores and our waters, and they come and interact with everything and interact with the humans one-on-one.
Scientific mythology about the orca isn't much different. This largest of the dolphin family, with a larger brain than the humans, is the dominant predator of the marine world. Until recently dominated by humans, the orca ruled the oceans of the world for thousands of years. Unlike the dominant species on Earth, the human, the lion and wolf, the orca does not make war. Dr. Randall Eaton started studying the orca in 1976. Prior to that, he spent 10 years studying the large carnivores. He is convinced that in certain fundamental ways, humans are more like the social carnivores than other primates. In the scientific journal Carnivore, Dr. Eaton wrote that while big game hunting was important to the origin of human behavior, humans succeeded at hunting only as well as they could defend the animals they killed from other predators. It doesn't do any good to kill big animals if you can't eat them. Once the animal hits the ground, everybody wants it. We've all seen what happens on the plains of Africa. It's a war between species for the carcasses. We forget that humans were right in the middle of it for hundreds of thousands of years. He thinks that humans won the lion's share by waging a long, bloody war against dangerous carnivores. Once humans climbed the top of the predatory ladder, other humans became their primary competitors and enemies, and warfare between groups of humans began in earnest.
When the human, in most places, not all, there's still some places where other creatures rule the landscape, not many, but a few. But in most places on this planet, when the human walks into an environment, to any habitat, the other creatures there yield to us. Now, there's 4 species on this planet that might be able to teach us something about how to rule ourselves and how to govern our relationship with our environment. There's not many. There's the lion, there's the wolf, and there's the orca whale. We're the other dominant species. What I'm suggesting to you is that our real problem here on this planet is learning how to govern appropriately for our own benefit and for the benefit of the circle of life in which we sit. So that's why my attention then turned to what is it that dominant creatures can teach us? Well, the wolves kill the wolves. When there's an intruder in the wolf territory, the pack attacks it and kills it. The lions kill the lions. Males are always forming armies, and they're going out, and that's how they get ahead in this world. They displace other males who are with females. At least that's their effort. They may not win, but that's what they try to do. And they wage lethal war to gain right to those females in the territory they live in. It's happening all the time in lion country. We humans behave pretty much the same way. We've been competing for resources for God knows how long, and wife stealing probably was one of the first forms of warfare. Not much different really than the lions. So when we come to the orca, we're stymied. The orcas don't make war. And it's a puzzle. Many people say to me when I point this out, because to me it's a great mystery, why they don't. They say, well, there are so many resources in the sea. But according to ecological principles, that argument won't hold up. If there's that many resources in the sea, there's going to be that many more orcas at some point in time. And they're going to find themselves coming into competition.
The lack of competition in mating is surprising in orcas. We find it in virtually every species that we've ever studied. But we get to the orca and we find a totally different kind of society. It's a true matriarchy, the only one outside of social insects that exists. The females lead the social group. The males who are their offspring stay with them throughout their lives and help raise other young. They only leave their groups to mate with females of other groups and then return after a short period of time. But there's no competition among males for a female orca who's receptive for mating. Based on his studies in northern British Columbia, Dr. John Ford believes that the females in another group make the decision about which male they want to come and fertilize the female member of their group who's ready to reproduce.
Why the orcas relate to us as they do is another mystery. Imagine catching a fully grown lion and riding it 3 days later, climbing on its back and walking around a cage, or doing a circus show, riding wild lions taken out of wild Africa. We can't imagine that. We can't imagine doing it with grizzly bears. But we do that with orca whales. Why is it they are tame towards humans? Why is it that they may even capture themselves? We have a book in here called Namu, and according to Ted Griffin, who wrote the book, Namu may have captured himself. What happened is he put out word that he wanted to have the first orca ever in captivity, and he wanted fishermen to try to capture a calf. They caught one in a place called Namu, British Columbia. And he got word that they had this calf, so he sent his 2 men up to check it out and to wait for him to arrive. They got there, and there was a calf inside a net. But while they were there, this great big bull orca came along, the one that ended up being called Namu. He swam into that net, and he led the calf out, but he stayed inside the net. That's the first puzzle. Secondly, the most surprising thing happened when, during the night, the tide went out, the net went down, it got stuck on rocks, and it didn't come back up, which meant that there was a whole tide cycle when Namu was not contained. He was totally free to go, but he stayed there. What surprises me and impresses me is that he clearly chose to remain there when he could have escaped easily. After they towed Namu down to Budd Inlet across from Seattle, 2 more times he escaped from his enclosure. They had a net across Budd Inlet, and a big log came and tore the net, and he swam out into Puget Sound. On both occasions, he swam back in on his own accord, and they repaired the net. These observations suggest to me that perhaps orcas are not captured. They may in fact capture themselves. The fact that during captures, orcas seem to attempt to avoid capture in many cases, and they do their best to escape, but once we do have them contained inside a net, it's most amazing that a diver can get right in the water with them and be totally safe. This 8-ton predator that can kill anything from flying ducks to blue whales, you can get in the water with it and guide it into a capture cage. One 200-pound man, can place his hands on the pectoral fin of a giant orca whale and direct it wherever he likes. Obviously, the orca's cooperating. But when those orcas get in the steel capture cage, guess what happens sometimes? The orcas die. They let their air out. They breathe water. They sink and they're dead. A matter of seconds. I've seen the films taken during all those captures from 65 to 76 here in Puget Sound. The head diver showed them all to me. And it's inescapable, the conclusion that they're committing suicide. Other orcas go along, they're pulled up out of the water, they're put onto a boat, they're taken to some airport and they're flown off to an aquarium. And they may live there for years, entertaining people day in and day out. So when you look at these kinds of behavior patterns and reactions to people and to capture, it's difficult to believe that orcas do anything but make decisions about how they want to relate to us. I believe that they know perfectly well what they're doing and that they make decisions to come into our world, the ones who do end up in aquariums, for entertaining us and building a bridge of relationship between our nation and theirs. Is very unusual as well. We hear about matriarchal societies among humans and among animals, and there are some true matriarchal societies, for example, in the social insects, where the queen really does govern the activities of the entire colony. There are some species, such as elephants, which are described as matriarchies, but I don't think they really are, because the males are not part of that female-directed group. We have bachelor herds and we have solitary old bulls that don't really mix with the female herd. So the elephant altogether is not found to exist within a matriarchy. However, the orcas do. The females govern the activities of all the members in the society. They're smaller than the males by 25 or 30%, but they seem to direct the activities, and it is a true matriarchy. Those males, those bulls that you're going to see here, they are the sons of the adult females. And they spend their entire lives helping their mothers raise other young. They're spending their lives as babysitters and as protectors of their younger siblings. Now, the Orca Society is also the most stable society that's ever been studied in terms of longevity of membership and the certainty that a member will be there in 5, 10, 20 years. And that individuals do not change groups, but stay within those same societies. So we have here the dominant predator of all the oceans of the world that does not make war, does not, at least today, kill us in self-defense. There are indications that they did at one time, but only those individuals, humans, who attack them. That has no competition among males for females when it comes to mating, which has probably a longevity that's as great or greater than any species known, short of trees, and which has probably the most stable society that we're aware of. What I'm suggesting to you is that there is good reason to learn about orca whales, and I believe to get to know them. I'm not just satisfied with observing their behavior, their ecology. It seems to me that if I were on assignment, for example, in another world, to observe extraterrestrials, I would not want to stop with note-taking or filming. I would want to know those beings. I would want to interact with them, to befriend them. And that's what happened in my own scientific evolution. In the course of studying orca whales, I got to a point where it wasn't enough anymore simply to document their activities, or even to theorize about their communication system and how to experimentally discover how they communicate. That wasn't sufficient. And rightly so, because where science ends, we do not end. So we set out to make friends with orcas. And we did that, and we've done it more than once. And it's been very rewarding. Those orcas, I believe, do come into our world in aquariums to build relationship between our nations. And by the same token, now that I've made friends with them and come to admire and respect them so much for the way in which they live, which really presents a model for what we would like to achieve as human beings. My desire has become to introduce humans to orca whales. In the same way that if I made friends with ETs on that other planet, I would come back and bring my brothers and sisters to that planet to extend that friendship. And that's pretty much where I feel that we're at right now. We have extraterrestrial intelligent life right here in the oceans of the Earth. I just can't think of a better way for us to learn or to grow than to share their world, learn about it, and meet them face to face.
Nearly 30 years ago in northern British Columbia, Eric Hoyt conducted an experiment that conforms with the book and film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. His experiment consisted of broadcasting underwater an imitation of the greeting call of the orca. With a synthesizer, Hoyt did his best to produce an imitation, but even to his ear, the imitation greeting call was decidedly not the same as the orca's. Moreover, he was able to imitate only the lower end of the orca's call. The point is simply that there is no reason to believe that orcas would perceive Hoyt's synthesized greeting call as emanating from another orca. That is precisely why his results are so startling. As soon as he broadcast the imitation, the orcas immediately responded, not with their greeting call, but with a precise imitation of his imitation. And that incredible event not only conforms with the fictional plot of humans encountering E.T., it confirms the prediction of the world's foremost space scientists as to what we might expect extraterrestrial intelligent life to do in response to our radio signals. Now you know why people like Dr. Eden have turned their attention to the inner space of the sea to encounter intelligent life. Randall's interest goes beyond science to the relationship between orcas and humans. And within that context, he's wondering how to make friends with wild orca whales.
The first time Nicola heard me call her name out loud, she came toward the boat. Just her among many orcas. Later, when as a group we called with pure enthusiasm to her, Nicola stopped, oriented to us on shore, and apparently called her clan together. Her female kin and younger calves assembled in one large group immediately in front of the observation post where we stood. They floated there on the surface as we yelled, "Nicola! Nicola! Nicola! Hey, Nicola! Come here, Nicola!" We laughed and jumped up and down as all the orcas watched us watching them. One or two at a time, the orca cows swam directly to us with a calf as the other orcas stayed assembled on the surface. A single calf in each envoy spy-hopped over and over, its head coming out of the water to look at us on the post. None of the cows spy-hopped, but the delegations continued until all the calves spied us close up. I believe that Nicola and her adult kin introduced their babies to a pod of friendly, excited humans. A true communion among species, and the high point of 20 years of fieldwork. After the cows and calves and their small subgroups came in to see us and left, everyone realized for the first time that they hadn't brought their cameras for the most spectacular event in Orca land. No cameras. A lesson there. Nothing between hearts. Magic happens when we're children enough to let it. So far, the best technique for attracting, befriending, and communicating with wild orcas is simply calling them. The Orca Project is about the meeting of nations.
Over the years, Dr. Eden perceived that when he or his Orca Project volunteers went swimming with the wild orcas, they never felt better. He believes that when the orcas use sonar to scan people in the water, it has the same kind of healing effect as reported for dolphins at swim programs in Florida.
Yesterday was my first encounter with the orca in the water. And when I went in the water, there was a mother and a calf. And when they scanned me, I felt this incredible, like a force hit me in the heart. And it was the most dramatic experience that I've ever had. And I certainly will be in the water with them as much as possible from this time on.
Oh, it was a leap of faith, I think, probably going over the side, and I'd mentioned that to you earlier, because there is a fear that's going on, because these animals are so huge. And I turned and looked, and he's heading right at me, and he's closing at about 50 yards at a real steady pace, and I can hear his breathing, and I'm watching his dorsal go down and come back up. And as he approached me, as I was looking on the surface, I watched his dorsal go down, and he was headed dead on to me, and obviously he had seen me at that point, or at least had scanned me and was well aware of my presence in the water. And the fact that in the open ocean, those animals choose to go past you that close when they don't need to. He could have scanned me and made a left turn at any point in time. But in his coming by that close for me to see him was for my benefit, not for his. And it was a learning experience, and after all, I turn into his spokesman. I come back and tell everybody who will listen, anybody and everybody, that you have no idea the majesty of these animals and their intelligence and their gentleness. It's incredible.
An authority on human interactions with big predators, Dr. Eden is quick to point out that historical relationship with lions and bears is nothing like it has been with the orcas.
I discovered, for example, that we still symbolize the nations of Europe with the lion, the only exception being Switzerland, which has the bear as its national symbol. And the story about the foundation of Bern, the capital of Switzerland, is that a great man killed a bear on this site. And he's the culture hero, if you will, the founder of that modern country. And as it turns out, the culture heroes of every society ever studied did the same thing. Edith Hamilton's book on mythology points out again and again and again that there's always a culture hero at the base of every society who did basically the same thing. He went out and killed an awesome beast. He founded their culture. And in Western civilization, we have a perfect example, Hercules, whose first and greatest feat was killing the Nemean lion, with his bare hands, no less. This is a pretty awesome achievement. He is, in a sense, the greatest trophy hunter in the history of Western civilization. And what that mythological event symbolizes is a turning point in our relationship to other creatures and really to this planet. Because to compress about 10 years of inquiry into a few moments, we gain dominion of planet Earth by changing our strategies. We no longer simply killed animals for food or to defend ourselves. A new strategy evolved. I call it trophyism. Killing animals, not for food and not for defense, but to prove one's prowess in society. And that had all sorts of benefits for those who won, but realize the more esteemed the trophy, the greater risk involved. So a lot of men did not win that game. And that's why when one did, he became a culture hero. And of course that became the new goal, if you will, the new ego goal for young men who wanted to climb up within their societies. That is, I believe, the basic motivation that gave us ultimately dominion of this planet. It was brave men who were willing to risk their lives against very awesome creatures.
But the Aboriginal peoples of the northern Pacific Rim tell a very different story about their relationship with the orca. They speak as one by saying that the orcas never attacked them, even though they lived side by side for millennia, preying on the same species, from salmon to great whales. Then they say someone from their society attacked the orcas, and the orcas attacked back. Consistently, these societies report that the orcas only attacked those individuals who had attacked them. Even more surprising, these Northwest coastal societies say that they've had peace with orcas ever since. Dr. Eaton explains that every component of the mythology about orcas is unique. Around the world, people were attacked often by lions, tigers, and jaguars, and it took scores of reprisal attacks by humans to finally dominate them. The people who know the orca far better than contemporary science all insist that the orcas attacked only the culprit who attacked the orcas. Nothing similar has ever been stated about terrestrial predators. Detailed accounts conforming with the ancient mythology come from modern Inuits in Alaska. He believes that we should give serious consideration to the possibility that orcas show ethical conduct towards us that equals our highest concept of justice. When humans take revenge against other human groups or dangerous predators, they rarely stop with the culprit. Assuming that orcas did attack humans when humans attacked them first, the real puzzle is why orcas don't attack us today during capture. Randall believes that as of 1956, orcas stopped attacking people even in self-defense, possibly because they know better. If orcas were to attack people today, it could jeopardize their survival. Even more enigmatic, why don't orcas eat people? Tigers still eat people in Sumatra. Grizzly bears still eat humans in North America. And in Hollywood films, Ghost and the Darkness is based on true events in which 2 lions killed and ate hundreds of coolies in Africa. If it's because orcas find humans distasteful, then there ought to be at least some evidence that they've tasted us at least once in a while. Orcas kill and eat virtually every animal in and around the edge of the sea. There are 2 cases in which orcas broke pack ice, and a dog and a man fell through the ice, but only the dog was eaten. The man went unharmed. There's only one way to account for predation by orcas on humans, and that is that orcas deliberately and purposely avoid attacking and eating people. From Greece to China to Micronesia to New Zealand, people have described dolphins rescuing people at sea. The same has been described for orcas by the Kwakiutl Indians of British Columbia. Why are dolphins and orcas compassionate towards people? Humans have slaughtered the dolphins and orcas, wiped out most of their food supply, and polluted their world. From the very beginning, Randall wanted to decipher the communication system of the orca. Working with a computer linguist, he discovered that the structure of orca communication was more complex than that of the English language. With the help of the Submarine Sonar Laboratory at the University of Washington, he discovered that the orcas communicate over the widest spectrum of sound frequency known. The upper hearing range for humans is about 20,000 cycles per second. For dolphins, the upper frequency is 125,000 cycles per second. But for the orca whales, the upper range of sound production is 250,000 cycles per second. He felt that other researchers were on the wrong track when they tried to construct nonverbal language that the dolphins could learn to use. It's true that Lewis Herman has managed to get dolphins to use simple language, but in his mind that only proves that dolphins are intelligent enough to figure out how to communicate with us. It doesn't move us one step closer to understanding how they communicate. Human language may be based on the imitation of sounds made by animals, as in the word wolf, which is derived from the sound woof, actually made by the wolf. Dr. Eaton applied the principle of onomatopoeia to dolphin and orca communication. Because bodies are basically the same density as seawater, sonic emissions provide sonar echoes from inside the bodies of other organisms. In other words, orcas and dolphins can use sound to see through one another. They have the equivalent of X-ray vision. We humans rely primarily upon vision, and the information we receive is from light reflected off surfaces. Then we switch to speech to describe what we see. Speech is a very inefficient means of communication, which is why we say that a picture is worth 10,000 words. Now just imagine that we humans were like Superman and could see through one another and objects. Now imagine that we also could look into another person's eyes and transmit all the information we just saw with X-ray vision. That would constitute the most advanced communication system known. It is this that Randall believes that orcas and dolphins do all the time with sound. Human speech is linear, spread out over time, but the toothed whales are adapted to communicate non-linearly. In other words, they communicate with sound pictures or holograms that contain enormous amounts of information transmitted in bursts of sound. It's a quantum leap beyond what we humans do. Dr. Eaton believes that it is possible for orcas and dolphins to lie to one another. He also believes that has enormous implications. If you can see through one another, it means you cannot deceive one another, which means that the mind and the society of these creatures is based on total honesty. It just may be that they know us better than we know ourselves. Randall suspects that they do not suffer from all the self-deceptions that we do. And for all we know, they don't make war because there's never a need to actually fight. With sonar, each combatant could always accurately assess the other's prowess. The belief that orcas may want to communicate with us is indicated by their imitation of sounds we make. Randall recorded wild orcas imitating the sounds made by humans talking in boats. During its first night in an aquarium, an orca imitated the whistling of a man for hours.
We're here on San Juan Island with Jim Nolman at his house. Jim has been interacting with animals for many years in interesting ways. He has a special interest in the cetaceans, and he uses music to communicate with them and get some very unusual responses.
Yeah, the cut from this tape that I'd like to play occurred in 1985. We had 47 whales around our boat, off and on over a 3-day period, and it was the most whales I'd ever seen, not only together, but also around our boat. And they seemed very playful, more so than usual, and they were very interested in the music as an entire group. In fact, there was moments when several of them were spy hopping together. And one of the best moments, actually, during the excerpt I'm going to play for you, there was not only all the whales, but a couple of whale watching boats and several scientists in their zodiacs just on the perimeter of this whole thing, sort of just sitting there, and nobody wanted to leave, and everybody had hydrophones in the water, and every time I hit an F-sharp note, all the whales came in together. So why don't I play some of that?
It is a little-known fact that more people visit zoos and aquariums every year than attend all the professional and collegiate athletic events combined, which means that wild animals in captivity constitute the foremost attraction in the world. The species that attracts the greatest number of people is the orca. More people spend money every year to see orcas than anything else. Orcas in captivity have done more to generate enthusiasm for sea life and concern for the oceans than all other influences combined. Jeff Foster, director of the Free Willy Keiko Foundation, began swimming with wild orcas in Puget Sound when he was only 14. For the last 28 years, he has worked with orcas, dolphins, and other cetaceans in captivity of the wild. While he single-handedly captured the largest octopus ever recorded, his greatest thrill was being caught by an orca. During capture of orcas in Iceland, a female orca grabbed Jeff in her jaws and dove straight down 50 feet before releasing him.
And I would position myself in just the wrong spot, and had a female come up and grab me and pull me underwater, which was, it's at night. It's they're usually, the herring is fished usually, at sometime during the night, and so it's kind of a surprise, and all you can do is really go for the ride. But she could have done a lot of damage, and she didn't. I was bruised a little bit, but that was about it. But for the most part, they will kind of, if they are being aggressive, they'll kind of like they teach you a lesson. That they'll take you, they show how powerful they are, they pull you down a little bit, but I think it's just to let you know that they're the more powerful of the two. It is surprising to see the top predator of the ocean, probably one of the top predators that ever lived, and be so gentle. They are a very, very intelligent animal. We don't know how intelligent they are. They have some marvelous adaptations that we're just beginning to understand. I think that they are that they learn very, very fast, and that they pick up on things better than we pick up on them. They can tell when a trainer is maybe not in a good mood, just because of body posture, maybe how they move that day, and how the hand signals may be given in certain cases. So I think that they're very perceptive, and that they know when we're in good moods and enthusiastic about doing a training session, and when we're not feeling good. And for us, to try to do the same thing with these animals, it's very difficult to be able to determine that. And I think there's alternative ways to be able to display these animals, and we need to start looking into them. And maybe it is holding them for short term, and then try to reintroduce them back into the wild. And and this is what we're trying to do with Keiko. We're looking into a different method of holding him. So we're going to construct this huge bay pen, and he'll be acoustically linked to his wild environment, which he hasn't had that opportunity to do for 15, 20 years. I think that there are better ways, and we could do more. I think that we shouldn't have solitary animals. I think that they're a very social animal, and I think it should be mandatory that these animals are housed in pairs or more. I think that we should do everything in our power to make sure that these animals aren't housed alone. I think there should be a very, very rigorous behavioral enrichment program that should be mandatory. And I think that we do need to look into, into different ways to be able to work with these animals and trying to understand them a little bit better. I see the Keiko Project as an opportunity to be able to take Keiko back into a wild setting, and truly try to understand. We've often said, the industry's often said that they're the ambassador of the species, but Keiko truly could be that ambassador. We give him the opportunity to go out and interact with these other animals and come back in and bring that knowledge back to us via transmitters or cameras or whatever we attach with suction cups to Keiko. I think that everybody's going to be better off. I think the greatest benefit is a better understanding of our oceans, and that we haven't done a very good job of managing our oceans and seas. There's very few fish populations that are not declining or have been decimated totally. And I think that if we can bring the focus back, onto our oceans and the seas that surround us, and take better care of them. It's like if we're out in the woods, you can look out and around Mount Rainier or some of these areas around here, you can look out and you can see the clear cutting, see the damage that we've done. But below the surface, we can't see that, and we don't know what we're doing to our oceans until some of the fish populations have been decimated. And I think that maybe with a project like this, that we can bring the focus back onto the oceans, and we can have a better understanding of the animals that live there, and take care of our oceans a little better than we have.
29 years ago this week, I first came to the San Juan Islands. The year was 1965, the pivotal year in the birth of a new consciousness on planet Earth. That same year, Namu was brought to the Seattle Aquarium, the first orca to ever be held in captivity. That same year, the Washington State Game Department was paying $50 bounty on each orca that was killed. All you had to do was bring in a dorsal fin to collect your money. Since 1965, there's been a lot of changes for the orca whale. No longer is it called killer whale in this area. Then the skies were clear. Now they're full of haze and smog. Then we weren't concerned about pollution of these seas. Now the pollution of these seas is so serious as to threaten the entire food chain. At that time, we didn't think there was a shortage of salmon. Now the shortage of salmon is so serious that salmon fishing, both commercial and sport, has been closed down in most of Washington State and also the coast of Oregon. The future for the orca is less certain than ever. While we're no longer shooting them for bounty, they face a whole raft of new problems, ranging from pollution of the food chain to loss of habitat. We're here on the west side of San Juan Island with Ken Balcom. Ken started studying the orca in 1976 and has been keeping track of the orcas here in Puget Sound during this whole period of time. Probably knows as much, if not more, about them and their situation as anyone else. Ken is an author. He's published several things. He's the co-author of this particular book on killer whales. And he's been the leader in photo identification of the orcas here in the Sound. Ken, what is the status of the resident orcas today in Puget Sound? How are they faring? Are they holding their own, or are they losing ground? What do you think?
Well, their numerical status is up from when we started the study in '76. There were 68 total individuals then, and right now they're a total of 90. If we look at the adult status, the ones that have stayed alive as mature individuals or matured in the study, we have a net loss of 4. So our increment is primarily young ones that if they make it to the adult stage in the next 6 or 10 years, we will have seen a recruitment or an increase in the population. And I'm hoping they make it.
Do you think there's any chance that they'll ever return to the pre-capture era when they were capturing all the orcas here in Puget Sound for aquaria?
Most of those captures went on from about mid-60s to early 70s. The population, in my estimation, was probably reduced on the order of 40%, maybe 50%. And I think they could recover to that population level they had before by around maybe 2010 or 2020, somewhere in another 30 years.
I'd like to ask you this, irrespective of their economic value or any scientific curiosity which you hold for them, in a nutshell, how would you summarize the nature of the orca?
The king of beasts. They're supreme. There's no question about that in my mind. I mean, even studying all the other whales, which are fantastic, these guys are supreme.
Though the Orca Project is about the behavior of orca whales, it is also a way that people can reconnect to the earth and the creatures and work with a small group of people, like a Paleolithic tribe in the wilderness. It's a very wholesome, healthy experience. And while the volunteers were in the field, they were introduced to the sacred ways of Native Americans. Those sacred ways, of course, honor the earth and the creatures.
The family has to own title, and you acquire that through marriages and a ceremony called potlatch. On the apron of mine, you'll see the killer whale, the Moganook. It's the animal you guys are all up here looking for. It's also one of my family's crests, and it's my personal crest as well because I'm a hunter.
In order for the Orca volunteers to fully embrace Aboriginal values of respect for the creatures and the earth, then they needed to experience their lifestyles. That means direct participation in the most fundamental process of life, the food chain. Some volunteers caught their first fish during the Orca Project, and for them the food chain became a love chain. They learned to bless and thank the fish. Altogether, their experience in the wilderness with orcas as their teachers healed them of the fragmentation of civilized living. Now they are in Orca's camp. Now they are ambassadors for the Orca nation, for the seas, and for all things wild.
We think we're the masters of this planet, and we really aren't. I mean, we may be the most powerful in terms of what we can do, but we haven't learned how to channel that energy. And I think the orcas are wonderful for us to experience because we know they're very bright. They're obviously brighter than us in many ways. And they live at peace in their environment and live at peace with us. And I think something's going on there also, that maybe this interest in them now isn't just coincidental. Maybe it's something that we need to help us make that leap into another level of existence. Something that's not just intellectual, but an experiential leap.
The orcas made me feel a part of the entire world and a part of the universe, because I felt that love in my heart, and I felt connected not only to human beings, but connected to all of the kingdoms.
Now, you know, the Indian people use the word medicine for power or empowerment, anything that empowers us. The experience with the orcas was so empowering that I feel like it enhanced the medicine that I'm working with now a great deal. It brought another dynamic to that medicine that I'm working with, which comes in the form of more compassion, more sense of an open heart, and a willingness and an ability to want to communicate through the experience with the orcas. That compassion, that openness, and that sensitivity and feeling that came through that experience.
Because everyone was like, weren't you scared on that boat? And they were so close to you. Weren't you afraid they were going to eat you? No, I was never scared. Not once was I ever scared of seeing those whales. They're just beautiful, you know, and I knew they would never hurt us. You know, I don't know if it was the song we were singing to them or but yeah, I love the orca. They're just beautiful animals. It's really neat.
I think they're the most magnificent creatures.
Would you like to see them again?
Treat them with respect as you would want your relatives and your family to be treated with respect. Don't harass them, take your photographs, move off, and let someone else go interact with the whales. They're a beautiful thing. We welcome people to come here and see our Moganook as native peoples, but please remember to respect them. It's not nice to look out and see our ancestors harassed day in and day out from sun up to sundown. Just remember, you're dealing with one of the most beautiful and largest predators on Earth, and they have minds, brains larger than us. So take the time to treat them as a respectful creature which they deserve. And don't forget to come and take a look at our carvings and our paintings. And if you can, witness one of our dances or potlatches, and you'll see the magana, how it's closely related to our living life to this day, and it's been in our culture for thousands of years.
The Macaw whalers describe the orca as one step above God for a reason. It was one step above man in his projection of himself to Godhead. They could never claim power for killing a being who did not attack them except in self-defense. The Macaw whalers were staunch egoists, civilized Indians whose societies were structured by war and trophies, the highest ranking of which were whales, because they were the most powerful and dangerous. The Macaw whalers of Puget Sound saw the orcas as this planet's ruler, blessed with what every human wants: freedom. Freedom from strife with one another, and freedom from conflict with enemies. The perfect planetary ruler struggles not within itself nor against its world. That is the orca. One step above God, one step above ourselves.